Hebrew in one respect is easier than some other languages in that there are only two main verb patterns in the whole language. In this lesson we will learn the second and last other main pattern, the imperfect. Here are the singular forms of the imperfect, and let me read them down. Yishmor, Tishmor, Tishmor, Tishmeri, Eshmor. Once again, you can see that the typical Hebrew verb chart begins with third person at the top, he and she, then second person, you, and then first person, I. You can see that the imperfect always adds something to the front of words. Sometimes the imperfect is called the prefix conjugation. Remember that the perfect, in contrast, always adds something to the end of verbs and is sometimes called the suffix conjugation. Now say down these imperfect forms with me, starting Yishmor. Yishmor, Tishmor, Tishmor, Tishmeri, Eshmor. Now I'll read the plural forms. Yishmeru, Tishmorna, Tishmeru, Tishmorna, Nishmor. Once again, you can see that all imperfect forms add something to the front. Third masculine singular and plural adds a yod. Second person forms always add a tav. First plural adds a nun. Many imperfect forms also add something on the end, as you can see. These imperfect forms are forms to learn well enough that you could recite them or write them without error. Please say them together with me. Yishmeru, Tishmorna, Tishmeru, Tishmorna, Nishmor. By the way, in the form Tishmorna, you can see that the accent is on the second last syllable. You may also have heard me pronounce the schwa in that syllable as silent, Tishmorna. I did that because there is a fine point in the reading rules that doesn't come up often. When a long vowel is in the second last syllable followed by a schwa and the syllable is accented, then the schwa is to be read as silent. Perhaps the best is just to learn this form properly. It's Tishmorna. Now, one good thing about Hebrew is that the prefixes and suffixes for the perfect and the imperfect are absolutely uniform throughout the language. All perfects in the whole language, no matter what conjugation or stem, whether a regular verb or irregular, they all have the same endings. All imperfects in the whole language, no matter what conjugation or stem, whether a regular verb or irregular, they will all have the same prefixes and endings. So it is very important to learn these well so they are automatic. Let's review them again. If a verb has a yod on the front with no ending, the subject is he. If a verb has tav on the front with no ending, the subject is either she or you masculine singular. If a verb has tav on the front with long chirec on the end, the subject is you feminine singular. If a verb has aleph on the front, the subject is I. If a verb has yod on the front with u on the end, the subject is they masculine. If a verb has tav on the front and na on the end, the subject is feminine plural, either they or you. Finally, if a verb has tav on the front and u on the end, the subject is you masculine plural. If a verb has nun on the front, the subject is we. But we haven't said anything about what the imperfect means. Well, the imperfect seems to be the opposite of the perfect in its use. Just as the perfect is used for completed action, the imperfect is used for incomplete action. Again, it seems that the verbal system in Hebrew is not based on time or tense, but rather on type of action or aspect. And the imperfect, as a basic starting point, shows incomplete action. This can show itself in translation in various ways. Our book presents 4 possibilities for the imperfect. The imperfect can simply be used for the future. This is the most common use, and the textbook has us learn the forms with the translation, he will keep. However, the imperfect can also show continuing action. And if you have an imperfect in a past time context, for example, it is usually best to translate he was keeping, continuing action. The imperfect can also show customary action if that fits the context. You can translate he always keeps. The imperfect can also have a modal nuance. That is, you can translate he may keep, or he could keep, or he would keep. Hebrew has no other words to express may or could or would. This all comes from the imperfect. So an imperfect can be translated in a variety of ways depending on the context. The imperfect, however, always expresses incomplete action, and for our beginning purposes, we can usually translate as a future, he will keep. Now let's read down the imperfect chart one more time together. Again, this is something to learn well. Let's start Yishmor. Yishmor, Tishmor, Tishmor, Tishmari, Eshmor. Now the plural, starting Yishmeru. Yishmeru, Tishmorna, Tishmeru, Tishmorna, Nishmor. With the perfect, we learned of a few changes with the verbs called stative verbs. It happens that there also is a change in the imperfect with stative verbs. Let's today learn this change. Actually, there's only one simple difference. Remember the stative verb kaved? We called this verb an E-class stative because its perfect has the E-class vowel tsere. It means he was or is heavy. Well, in the imperfect, a patach comes in instead of a cholam. Remember, the regular imperfect paradigm was yishmor. Well, the stative imperfect is yichbad. There's a patach in the second syllable. Here is the old class stative verb that we learned. Katon means he is or was small. The imperfect of katon will be yiktan. There is a patach in the second syllable of stative verbs in the imperfect. Perhaps it is not too early to acquaint you with the main verb chart of the regular verb. This is the full verb chart of the regular verb. Now what we'd like to zero in on is the left 3 columns, which is the regular conjugation that we are learning, and there you can see the perfect and imperfect forms that we have learned. You can see there are 3 columns. The left column is the regular verb like shamar. The second column is the E-class stative verb kaved. The third column is the O-class stative verb katon. Now look at the imperfect of kaved. It goes yichbad, tichbad, tichbad, tichbadi, echbad. Yichbadu, tichbadna, tichbadu, tichbadna, nichbad. Notice the patach coming in. We can also see this in the imperfect of katon. Look there. It goes yiktan, tiktan, tiktan, tiktani, ektan. Yiktanu, tiktana, tiktanu, tiktana, niktan. Again, you can see the patach, and this is the one change of stative verbs in the imperfect.